Good morning everyone. My name is Janjalani Kamil Guzman from BEd 2A. Today, we will discuss about the second language acquisition. Second language acquisition or sequential language acquisition is learning a second language after a first language is already established. Many times, this happens when a child who speaks a language other than English goes to school for the first time. It also the process by which people learn a second language. Second language acquisition, often abbreviated to SLA, is also the scientific discipline devoted to studying that process. The field of second language acquisition is this subdiscipline of applied linguistics, but also receives research attention from a variety of other disciplines such as psychology and education. One of the most important contributions to SLA theory has been proposed by linguist and educational researcher Stephen Krashen. Krashen's 5 hypotheses listed below are based in part on Chomsky's ideas that humans possess innate language ability that includes an internal universal grammar. Krashen's 5 hypotheses are: number 1, the acquisition learning distinction; number 2, the natural order hypothesis; and then number 3, the monitor hypothesis; number 4, the input hypothesis; number 5, the effective filter hypothesis. Number 1, the acquisition learning distinction. Krashen distinguishes between acquiring competencies and learning competencies in a second language. Language acquisition, for Krashen, refers to the process of gaining language ability in essentially the same manner that children learn their mother tongue. It happens without memorizing vocabulary or learning grammar rules, and is nearly a subconscious process. Language learning, on the other hand, refers to the conscious knowledge of a second language, meaning the process of gaining awareness of the way a language works, such as spelling and grammar rules, whether learned formally or informally. Number 2, the natural order hypothesis. There is a natural and predictable order of acquiring the grammatical structure of a second language, moving generally from simpler to more complex, and from more similar to less similar to the future first language. Number 3, the monitor hypothesis, that which has been consciously learned of the form of a second language functions only as a means of monitoring what had been naturally acquired before or after a new utterance is produced. Number 4, the input hypothesis. This most well known of Krashen's hypothesis states that for language acquisition to advance, there must be comprehensive input. To acquire more of the language, an individual must understand the meaning of language with content that is a little beyond our current level of competencies, beyond that which was previously understood. This sort of input, for Krashen, is a necessary condition for progress in language acquisition. It becomes possible with the help of context and extra linguistic information. Number 5, the affective filter hypothesis. Affective factors such as emotions and attitudes have a bearing on the success of second language acquisition. These factors can be placed into 3 categories. Number 1, motivation; number 2, self-confidence; and number 3, anxiety. The higher the affective filter, the greater the barrier to language acquisition, in that the acquirer will be less likely to seek input, and it will be less likely that comprehensible input will be integrated into their previously acquired language.
Hello everyone, my name is Aljahid K. Bakar, one of the reporter for Chapter 3, A Language Acquisition.
Cognitive Theories of SLA. Cognitive psychologist John Robert Anderson opposed Chomsky theory, and instead conceive of language learning as a very concrete task that could be accomplished through knowledge and practice. Anderson and Scan 2000. Anderson proposed a model of how skills are learned called adaptive control of thought, rational ACTR, which has been extended to studies of cognitive development and SLA. This theory proposes that complex cognition is composed of relative simple knowledge units which are acquired according with relatively simple principles. Anderson 2000. He designates the simpler units as a declarative knowledge and the cognitively complex as procedural knowledge. Declarative knowledge is essentially factual knowledge that one gains typically by verbal or other communication. Procedural knowledge in contrast to declarative knowledge. In other words, the JPD marks the boundary between the level of development that a learner can reach alone and that which can only be reached with the help of a tutor. Someone at a higher level of development with whom the learner can interact in order to advance commence sees the JPD an intersection of opportunity where minds meet and new understanding can arise through collaborative interaction and inquiry. Cummins 1996 cited in Cummins 2000. This takes Krashen's 1987 assertion that fluency emerges simply as a result of providing comprehensible input. A step further, a balanced diet will include opportunities to produce outputs to use language and meaningful interaction. Lightbound and Espada 1993 cited in Noonan 2000. Swain 2000 explained the need for outputs in second language acquisition, speaking, writing, collaborative dialogue, and etc. This pushes learners to interact with the language at a deeper level than when there is only input. Swain argues that output stimulates learners to progress toward a more complete processing of the grammar necessary for accuracy. Language proficiency, Cummins. An important theory proposed by Jean Cummins is that of common underlying proficiency, or CAP, which state that proficiency in a learner's L1, such as a literary skills, are universal in the sense that such skills can be applied or transferred to an L2. To understand proficiency, Cummins distinguished basic interpersonal communicative skills from cognitive academic language proficiency. Cummins 2000, BICS might include skills such as basic grammar and sociolinguistic rules for communication and familiar social context, which Cummins refers to as a context-embedded communicative acts. This domain of interaction could include greetings, for example, or asking for direction, or dialogue necessary when shopping, where interpersonal cues such as gesture, facial expression, and intonation also communicate meaning. CALP, on the other hand, refers to more cognitively demanding, context-reduced tasks such as understanding, lectures of recognizing, understanding and communicating in different genres of writing, informative reporting, persuasive writing, and etc. Cummins 2000. Written language. Writing an email message to close friends is in many respects more context embedded than a giving lecture to a large group of people. In the context of an elementary school classroom, the difference between play language and classroom language might correspond well to BICS CALP distinction. Playground language does not normally require the language associated with the higher order thinking skills such as hypothesizing, evaluating, inferring, etc. Gibbons 1991 cited in Cummins 2000. Having a casual face-to-face conversation with one person where the conversation is likely to be supported by interpersonal and contextual cues. BICS. When learners are challenged cognitively but contextual and linguistic support is given, they will progress in the acquisition of the second language most successfully the most challenging scenarios where the higher academic function of language are required and there is minimal support through contextual or interpersonal cues to help reveal meaning. Cummins 2000. Understand academic language proficiency as the ability to make complex meaning explicit in either oral or written modalities by means of language itself rather than by means of contextual paralinguistic clues. One significant aspect of this model for education is that children must reach a threshold level of proficiency in their L1. A certain degree of cognitive development in academic language or CALP of the L1 before academic achievement can succeed in a second language. Cummins 2001. Without sufficient cognitive development in the L1, it is unlikely that proficiency in the L2 will advance beyond the pupil's proficiency in the L1. Another important point is this studies of immigrants learning English as their L2 show that conversational aspect of proficiency could reach peer appropriate levels usually within about 2 years of exposure to the language, but an average of 5 to 7 years was needed for immigrant students to reach a level of proficiency considered normal for the grade level in academic aspects of English. Cummins 2000. The danger comes when proficiency in VSS type communicative acts is interpreted as overall proficiency in the language, and educators fail to recognize that their pupils' proficiency at the CALP level is still lagging behind those for whom the L2 is their first language.